The pressure we put on youth in school is nothing short of overwhelming, from expecting them to fit into traditional learning environments to the intense pressure of having their future dictated by their academic performance at just 14 years old. We need to change the narrative to support the uniqueness of each individual and the many directions they may take on their own life journey. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter, and today I'm joined by a former elementary school teacher, the author of memoirs, essays, and picture books, and the writer of the Empty Next blog, Cara Mentzel. Join us as we explore different ways ADHD may present itself with schooling, discuss the pressures we've put on youth, and share different ways to support the next generation from both a teacher and parent perspective. Cara, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for our conversation. But before we begin, I really just want to check in with you. How are you really?
Great question. I'm doing really well, and I'm also in like a transition place. So I'm also a little overwhelmed. It's the good stress, but it's still the stress. So, and right now I have the dog on my lap. Otherwise it's weird if the camera cuts off the dog and it just looks like I'm petting my lap. Anyway, she's here because otherwise she'll be barking at the door for my attention. So I moved the end of May, beginning of June, and then we went on this long road trip, and then we just came back and I thought, we'd have everything settled when we left for the road trip, but we just didn't. And so here I am in a little chair in a little room that is not set up yet. But I have the joy of figuring out exactly how I want to set it up in a little bit. So I'm excited about it.
Moving is a lot. It's really exciting and really stressful trying to figure it out. And there are so many questions that we think about after as we're trying to figure it out. So I wish you a lot of luck with figuring it all out. And I hope it all goes amazing. I'm excited for you. And I'm really excited to talk with you because when we first connected, there were so many different things that we just related on. I mean, like, for example, my brother grew up with ADHD and we never knew what questions to ask. We never knew what to do. We tried all these different avenues of trying to support him and be there for him, from medications to adjusting his diet. And nothing seemed to work. And it was something that we all felt so alone in. And when I talked to you and I realized you had a very similar experience with your kids, it was absolutely amazing to not feel like I was so alone in it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I think, there's a bit of a stigma around ADHD. There's a lot of people that sort of think it's not as prevalent as we think it is, as some of us think it is. I know as a teacher in my classroom, back in the day, I think it was something like 5% of students. So I was like, okay, so that's like out of my 30 kids, that's like 1.5. Is that what that? I can't do the math. But, I should have 1 to 2 students who struggle with focus. For a while, I thought, okay, that's true. There's 2 students who maybe stand out as having a focus that is far different than the other students' ability to focus. But then as time went on, focus is this really vague, undefined concept, right? Because, and that's why I think ADHD had so many, what do they call them? Like parameters that you can look at. There's your impulsivity, there's your attention, there's, I don't think aggression's on there. Can't remember.
I think so. Hyperactivity is on there.
Hyperactivity, right. Impulsivity, hyperactivity, attention, right. And so, it could look like many things. I think in a classroom is different than personally when you have your own children, because what other factors could be contributing. What they're like in other environments. And so there's just a lot more information about those kiddos. Of course, you don't see them compared to other kids. So you don't have that point of comparison, which can be really helpful in terms of a diagnosis. But my take on that whole thing is that there are so many contributing factors to who we are and how we behave in any given context that the labels, the diagnosis is helpful insofar as it allows you to find validation and an effective treatment. I think that for me, I never wanted to pathologize my kids. I wanted to figure out something's going on. I know something's going on. Teachers tell me something's going on. I need to acknowledge that and figure out what it is. But I also don't want to spend all this energy and time and language surrounding them with what's wrong with you? What's the problem? Do you know what I mean? So there has to be a balance on this path where you're trying to figure out, what the support looks like, what the validation looks like. And that's your driving force. Otherwise, you can undermine the very thing you're trying to accomplish, which is lifting this little self-esteem, lifting this sense of self, and helping somebody explore their identity and how they can contribute in the world,
Yes, exactly. And for my brother, the hardest part, from my perspective, I'm totally speaking from my perspective, but for me was watching him being compared to me all the time, because I was one of those kids who would sit and just read an entire book a day and loved it. And you couldn't get him to read to do his homework. Or I had to have straight A's or I would panic. And he was like, okay, if he got an F, he would laugh. The world didn't end to him. For me, it ended at if I got an A-. So we were constantly compared. I would sit all day and write papers, focus on my homework, decided to start writing blogs, just doing all these things. And he wanted to play with his toys or play video games. So he was constantly compared against me, and not like it was intended to be a bad thing, but I watched his self-esteem constantly go down as, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing this? Your sister does this. And it was so hard for him because he wasn't actively choosing, like, I don't care about my homework, I don't want to do it. He was just excited about other things. He was excited about learning all about cars and playing video games where he got to see what the fastest car was and driving it. He wasn't worried about his math homework like I was.
Mm-hmm. Math homework's a biggie. You bring that up, but math homework sort of defined this year for me because I moved to LA from Colorado, and I live near my nephew now, who's 13. And he just transitioned to middle school, and I was the math tutor. So I was the pre-algebra, I think it was advanced pre-algebra, which is all they offered. So you don't get the option at like normal. Not that he couldn't handle it, he could, but jumping to middle school is still a big leap without advanced math. So and then I'm an elementary school teacher, and I hate the thing that's like elementary school teachers don't really know math because they only need to know like up to 5th grade math, because the idea is not that you know math, it's that you know math pedagogy. I realize that I'm taking this on a whole nother direction. So
no,
you just right back in a second. But so I spent so much of this year like diving into math homework with my 13-year-old nephew. And I think what ended up being so successful about our dynamic is that I wasn't like, presenting a problem and then watching him as he figured it out and waiting for him to find the right answer. Do you know that sense of pressure when you're like with a teacher or a tutor and they're like, you can feel them waiting for you and like watching your thinking, and it's so hard to stay present with the problem when somebody's next to you like that. And instead, it was very authentically like, no, I'm trying to figure this out too. Right there, literally right there beside you, I'm figuring it out too. And maybe if you gave me a heads up of what we were doing today, I have looked at some Khan Academy videos and done a little pre-studying. But so I think the pressure was off and the focus was on problem solving. And I genuinely love that. So I can bring some excitement to that. But when you talk about kids having different interests and different things being easier for different kids, or just the, if we're all kind of on the lazy river, there's a very slow pull toward different directions, and we can't, what your brother was doing, didn't mean that he was without direction. It just was so often compared to yours, right? I think I called it a lazy river because right now it feels very, when I look back, the direction of movement was so slow for me, like figuring out what I wanted to do and which way I was flowing. But I realized that for some people, it's like the rapids. Being my sister's sister, being Dina Mentzel's sister, for example, it was very clear that she was going to be a performer. So there was a competitor for a while because she was so good at tennis. Also, she had this like wicked backhand, and it was like, oh my God, she could be a tennis star. So maybe, you know, there were a number of things sort of pushing in one direction, but for me, it was very much like, okay, here I am, you know, in my tube, floating on the river. I'm not really sure where I'm going. That looks good. That looks good. So I relate to your brother, but I also was a total people pleaser. So I didn't necessarily do the math homework and do all my homework because I loved it. I did it because I wanted the teachers to think highly of me. But I guess I also loved it. It's hard to tease those apart, right? Am I doing it because I love it, or am I doing it because somebody says I'm good at it and they love that I do it?
Right?
You know, I guess we all sort of have our audiences, even if it's, you know, an audience of one teacher saying, oh, you're a great artist, or oh, you're a great writer.
I recently learned that I actually love math. I'm one of those people who loves to like perform well. I have to be like the best at everything. I'm one of those people. So validation from others really gets me going. Working on that. But I learned that I do really love math because my younger cousins are in high school and they've been calling me to do their algebra homework. And I got so excited. I have my whole work notebook is full of algebra equations and problems.
Yes,
I went through like 8 lessons and I was like, wow, I really, really love this stuff. Maybe I should have been a mathematician or something that has to do with math. I don't know.
yes.
But you don't realize it until later.
I started a new writing journal, and it's like every 3 pages is like, you know, math homework, algebra, you know, what percentage equals this of this, and, you know, how many teaspoons are whatever, and, you know, pi and whatever, all that good stuff. So it's funny. That's my writing notebook right now. You could tell that my brain is, you know, in all these different places. After this, I'll probably send you a photo of what my house looks right now, because you'll be like, oh, that's a great metaphor for her brain and how easily off topic she was drawn in so many, and how she was drawn in so many different directions. Yeah, you'll see.
No, I love that. And I love that we're going through that math thing together, because my whole notebook is all math. And it's really fascinating to me how different everyone learns. And I didn't realize that until I'm sitting there with she's 15. That blows my mind. She's 15. So my 15-year-old cousin, and we're doing her homework. And like for me, math was always very easy and common sense. I was taking Calc 2 in high school. Loved it. Had so much fun with it. And it's just very common sense, natural to me. But for her, it's a lot of, okay, wait, do that again. Go back, let's start from the beginning, explain it without numbers. Like, what does this mean? For me, love numbers. For her, that becomes so overwhelming. So what's the actual goal of what I'm looking for? How am I doing this? And breaking it down. And she loves games. For me, I genuinely love to sit and read through it and practice a million times and get it wrong and then force myself to get it right. Just keep going till I get it right. For her, she wants it to be fun and exciting and play games and interact with it. So it's really fascinating to me how I never saw that earlier. And had my brother's instruction been tailored toward him, if when I sat down and helped him with his homework, if I wasn't trying to teach him the way I taught myself, how different it would be. So it's really fascinating how different kids are and that all different learning styles exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, you know, child development is a thing. It's a real thing, you know, and we're so, as an elementary school teacher, there's just kids who were so quick to say, I'm not good at math. And I'm like, hey, dude, we're in 2nd grade. Like, we don't get to decide that right now, you know, and hopefully you never will make that decision, because tomorrow is a new day, you know. But my son, my youngest, and his ADD, it looked very different than my oldest. My oldest, it looked very sort of what you typically imagine with the hyperactivity and some of the impulsivity and all that stuff. My youngest, it was really more just the focus piece. So sometimes I didn't recognize the parallels. At any rate, he really struggled with math in elementary school. And my best friend was his 4th grade teacher. And she said, I think something's up. I can't put my finger on it, but he's clearly trying really hard and something's amiss. And thank goodness, because I took him for testing, which is always nice. When you have privilege and money, you can take your kid to the neurologist and the psychologist and figure out what's going on. And it turned out that there are a number of things that he was very high at, intellectually, on his intelligence scale or whatever, things that were very easy for him to do. And then there were things that were like he was in like the 0.02 percentile for like sequencing numbers, from an auditory perspective, not even from a visual perspective. That one was low too. But so like him just copying a problem off the board and putting it on his page took an enormous amount of mental energy. So there were things that were exhausting him throughout the day that we didn't know. And because he was so bright, he was compensating. And then when you compensate, you can perform average. And then that's great because you're not falling below any levels and nobody's alarmed. And so everybody thinks you're just fine, but you're not performing at your potential. So it was really helpful to say, in addition to maybe struggling with some focus, he actually has these huge challenges that don't match his strengths. And so he's dealing with this discrepancy all the time and having to accommodate for it. And it's tiring him out. And then he comes home and he's in a bad mood and he's tired. And he thinks he's bad at math when he's actually very good at problem solving and very good with the conceptual pieces. But, in much the same way that someone who's dyslexic would be struggling with transposing letters or all sorts of, I don't want to oversimplify dyslexia now, but there were struggles. So it's true how he needed to learn was very different. I mean, let the kid take photographs of the board, let him use his phone to take pictures of problems on the board instead of having to copy all the problems down himself. That was like huge. And suddenly, a few years later, he loves math and he's actually very good at it. And I don't think that happens for a lot of people. I don't think we get to the other side of it where we realize, oh, something was amiss. What is it? Let's look at it. Oh, now I actually like math. So
a lot of people don't get it. And I know for my brother, the hardest part was he didn't get that till way later. And it wasn't until he started trying to learn in different ways and actually break down what he could and couldn't focus on and develop a healthier relationship with the ADHD medication that he actually was willing to take the medication when he needed to and then not take it when he didn't need to. And learn that he didn't want to feel like he was mummified all the time. He didn't want to feel like he was stuck as kind of like he would lose a piece of his personality to be able to focus and do the homework. He didn't want to miss out on making friends. It was so hard for him to make friends until I think his senior year of high school when they finally found a medication that didn't mummify him to a complete, like he would sit there and he'd be like this. And it was heartbreaking. And that became his whole personality that people saw, or an aggression when the medicine would wear off. So when he finally got the right medication, developed a healthy relationship with it, and was able to be himself in a way and not feel like he was competing against anyone or being compared to anyone, he found different ways to learn, found what he liked and didn't like. He's one of those people who he wants to get something done. He'll work on one specific assignment, stop, rest for a little bit, go back to it. I, on the other hand, will sit in front of my computer all day for days and keep going nonstop. Very different. Once he learned that, hey, I don't have to do what my sister does. I can be my own person. He realized that he was actually pretty good at math. He has not the world's greatest reading comprehension skills yet, working on it, but he can actually read through a paragraph or a book and remember it a little bit, and learning different ways to remember it and being able to learn to write and how to use a thesaurus. I think everyone thought I had biggest words, biggest vocabulary. I'm like, I use a thesaurus on almost every word. Still do to this day. My vocabulary on paper is not what it is in real life. Throwing that out there.
That's true for a lot of people, I think. Because when we talk, we're trying to get it out fast, right? Yeah. So, at least that's the tendency. When we write, we're trying to get it out clear and concise as possible. But I have a couple things to say. One is I had a student who, I had a lot of students, especially when I was teaching literacy, these small groups of the students who were struggling to learn to read. He was extremely ADHD. And when his mom was experimenting with meds, so I think I was working with him as a first grader, they put him on meds and he went to that like kind of zombie place. so heartbreaking because in that place, he could read, man. He could read. It was like mind blowing, whereas the day before, the words just, he couldn't pace himself to absorb the text in sequentially or in a organized way. The words were just kind of jumping all over the place. When he was medicated, it was like, oh my gosh, he could read. But then I was like, where'd he go? Who is he? He's not laughing. He's not here. You know what I mean? So I had to give that feedback to his parents. And I was like, okay, well, he can read. It's not that he doesn't have the skills. And we don't want him that medicated. We're going to have to find a middle ground, find something else. So it becomes really hard to tease apart which is the core issue that's affecting your ability to succeed academically. And because academics are so important in our culture, it impacts self-esteem from so early on. My other thing I wanted to say is my oldest, Avery, we sent him to Cornell College, which is not, it's the one in Iowa, in this little town called Mount Vernon, Iowa. And there's only 2 colleges that do one class at a time. There's Colorado College in Colorado. That one actually is in Colorado. Cornell College is in Iowa, and they do one class at a time. And so he would have 3.5 weeks of one class, hardcore, 8 to 3, and then the whole night would be working on stuff for the following day. And when I heard about that structure for learning, I was like, that may be the only college that my son would succeed at. I hate to say it that way, but it's the transition and the juggling that really makes it difficult for him. So for him to not have to transition from one subject to the next, for him to not have to make a decision and prioritize, should I be working on Spanish right now or should I be working on physics? All those decisions he spins on, and he just can't transition. And then if he does decide, okay, let's work on physics, he's then stuck for I don't know how long figuring out where he left off on physics and where he needs to jump back in. And there's just all this wasted time. So instead, he got, you've got one thing and one teacher and one group of students that you're working with. And so narrowing that focus onto one class, I think, was huge in terms of his success at college. And I'm so grateful for it.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, even a student who is not living with ADHD, it's really hard to focus on 10 different subjects at once.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult when they're all over the place. I know for me, I'm one of those people who I focus in on one class, go straight through, study for that class, pray that the exams are not on the same day. If the exams are on the same day, one class is not going to go well because my brain can do one at a time. When they're back-to-back days, I'll just stay up all night and keep going for the next class, take the test, and then sleep. Right. My brother, on the other hand, he's very good in short increments of time focusing in on one thing. But if you need him to focus in on learning environmental science and nutrition and statistics all at once, that's so overwhelming for him because his brain, once he starts to switch, gets distracted. And if one class has something that's a tiny bit similar that he can relate back to the other class, his brain gets so every direction trying to figure out what's happening.
Yes.
And it's a lot. It's so much. So to see that there's options like that out there is incredible.
Yeah. But you bring up a really good thing, though, because there's an intelligence to distractibility, right? Because they see the connections. So it's a bummer that he can't take, 3 or 5 classes all at once, because he can integrate all that information and see the connections. Even if it's a philosophy class and a physics class, he's going to find, the connections, and it's going to fascinate him. And it's going to take him 3 hours to think about those things and never get on top of the assignment, the task at hand. So, it's funny that he sort of has to force the focus onto one class because his brain is going to do all that networking and connecting everything anyway, So yeah, it's fascinating. I think part of the trick, if you're someone like your brother or someone like my boys, is to be fascinated by your learning process. It's so easy to be frustrated with it, but to be fascinated and to be like, oh, look, there I went. Not sure what happened for the last 10 minutes, but I'm back and ready to learn. Okay. And I maybe have, 5 minutes in me to focus on this. Maybe I've got 10, and then I'll get a snack and come on back, whatever it is. Like, to me, and this is an important thing to say, I think, to me, a lot of times the children who struggle when they're younger are forced to develop strategies and self-awareness that sometimes other students, because they don't have the necessity, they don't develop until maybe when they're older. Of course, I've also dated plenty of men who never develop. But
a lot of them don't.
Hopefully, over time you're given reason to develop certain skills and strategies. But a lot of times it's people who struggle when they're little, and hopefully they don't have to struggle too much, but then they're given, supports. If they're lucky, they're given support systems. They're taught what accommodations they need. They're taught how to advocate for themselves. And those are some huge life skills that they start practicing early on instead of later on.
Yeah, that is so true. My brother was able to say, I need my afternoon medication. I need this. I can't do this. Versus I, on the other hand, got to a point where I didn't know how to say what I needed. I didn't know how to understand what I needed. And I just struggled till I ended up in a psych ward. So I guess in some aspect, it worked a little better for him in some ways and better for me in some ways. And we're figuring it out still. But going back to what you said about being fascinated with where your brain goes and what you're learning and what information fascinates you, also being okay with the fact that you're fascinated by different things, that maybe you don't want to you're not able to focus in on one thing for 10 hours straight to do that math problem or write that paper, and know that that's okay. And you don't need to be comparing yourself to everyone else who may be able to do it differently. I think for my brother, it was the hardest part, that constant comparison, not just for me, but for his other students, right? These students can do this. Why can't you? Other students can sit still and be quiet. Why can't you? What's wrong with you? Instead of finding ways to get him to get out some of that energy, maybe sending him for a walk to deliver something to another classroom, just getting him to move and get that energy out in a different way that's right for him.
And there being no shame in it. You know what I mean? Like, I had, oh my God, wall push-ups were a big thing. You know what, dude? Give me 100. And he loved that. This is another kid. I'm not even talking about the same kid. He loved doing his 100 wall push-ups. And would the other kids have started reading their book first, because he was busy doing his push-ups? Yes. But he loved it. It made him feel present. It got a lot of energy out. He felt strong. And then he sat down and he could read, maybe for 5 minutes and not half an hour. But those are 5 more minutes of learning and absorbing information and practice than he had before, So yes, sending a kid to run an errand or to do something, certainly something physical, or letting them go to the bathroom when they don't really need to go to the bathroom, but they know they need a break. Those frequent breaks are important. And teaching them that, like, you can just tell me you need a break as opposed to telling me you have to go to the bathroom. I don't know. It's funny because I'm talking about this. I miss teaching so much, but I also, all my closest friends are teachers, and they're just, it's so hard right now, because it's not all about knowing what your students need or how to support them. It's having the tools and the environment and the culture to provide for all those students what they need. And, so much, I'm sure there are shitty teachers out there, but the ones that I know are unbelievable. And if they're struggling, that says something. And I remember my struggle. One of the reasons I stopped teaching, and I haven't decided if I'm done, but I've decided I'm done several times, and then I keep having to make the decision again. I am maintaining my license, but one of the reasons I stopped was I was an interventionist at the time, and I kept being asked to choose which students I would work with. So I would do this like broad assessment of the students in the school, and then I'd figure out which ones would best benefit from being with me for 40 minutes every day, whatever. And And sometimes I was a part-time, sometimes I was only there half a day. I wasn't even there a full day. So let's just say there were a lot of kids that would benefit from extra time in a small group with an interventionist. And I was supposed to decide who receives that and who doesn't. And that was just way too big a responsibility. I hated making those choices, particularly because there's a social, socioeconomic piece, So what about, so there are students who come from more privileged families who, can get their homework done and bring their homework back to me and do this whole rigmarole, and perhaps make more progress when they're working with me because there's follow through at home. But that's not fair. I want to work also with the students who don't have that support at home, and shouldn't those be students I'm prioritizing? Or I don't want to prioritize. I just want all these students to get what they need, right? And so do their teachers. And then it's just like, it's that sucked. I can think of the glass half full and all the great work that I was able to do with all these students. But those decisions were not fun. And I did not appreciate being in a position where I had to figure out how to distribute a resource that was not enough,
A very unfair position to be in. And it's a huge responsibility because it impacts someone's life, and being forced to choose who gets that extra support, who gets that help a lot. But I think that is what's happening a lot lately in so many different ways. The lack of funding we're seeing towards schools. A lot of schools can't get a therapist or a guidance counselor. They've switched it to a lot of academic advisors. So I know when I went to school, we didn't have guidance counselors in the traditional sense like my parents had, where if something was wrong, you had someone to talk to and get some support. We had academic advising, and that was really it. And there's some schools that I've been privileged to speak at that they have therapists on staff, psychologists on staff. They have all these programs in place. They're willing to put money toward bringing speakers in because they have the funding, because they have that extra funding, so they can. And then there's schools, there's districts where it's like there's one therapist that's maybe available for 10, 15, 20 schools. There's not enough resources and support being put in. And we're putting so many teachers in unfair positions to kind of figure it out and figure out how to best support every student, and feeling like they have to choose.
Fill that gap, right? Yeah. To fill the gap between what the students need and what we can. Yeah. And I think safety comes up too, because there's a mental health piece to a child feeling safe, but there's also an academic place. I mean, the first thing you learn as a teacher is a student needs to feel safe to learn. So if there isn't a sense of comfort and safety in a classroom or a school, like, you can have the best teacher or the best counselor, but there's only so much you can do. Nothing sticks if a kid is preoccupied because something's, there's a threat somewhere, whether it's, they're worried about being sick, or whether, it's gun violence, or whether there's something going on at home. The fact that there's so much that challenges the child's sense of safety right now undermines so much good work that could be done,
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a young mother thinking about, how much do I shelter my kids from reality, and how much do I expose them to what's real so they can learn life skills, and, and ideally there'd be some sort of gradual process, as they're ready to as they mature, that they have more skills and more ability to process more difficult information about the world they live in, the world they're growing up in. But now I don't even ask myself that question, because it's like, how do you even shelter? You can't shelter kids from reality. I used to think I had the power to do that. But I don't see, it's so much more difficult to do than it used to, whether it's because of social media or media in general, or whether it's because of gun violence, or mental health issues at home, or there's just reality is difficult. And when we set this goal for ourselves that as a parent we're trying to raise children, happy children, we want them to experience as much happiness as possible, or whatever, there's something about that that's askew with reality. That's that's not reality. Happiness, wanting to be happy, laughing a lot, oh my goodness, that's wonderful. But that is not the be all end all goal. And if it is, then of course people are going to end up really depressed and disillusioned. Our bodies aren't even made chemically to be that way. That would be an uphill battle just from a biological standpoint for a woman anyway, with a menstrual cycle, like, oh my gosh, we're talking about all these academic behaviors and things, but they're also impacted by where we're at in our cycle. We like have an expectation that we're going to be or feel a certain way, and suddenly we're totally different for 3 days. And we have to have the wherewithal to go, oh, that's probably because I have a lot of progesterone right now, or no progesterone right now, or whatever it is. So it's just fascinating to me that I've realized that I don't think about sheltering kids so much anymore from reality, so much as, what skill set would be helpful for a child to be learning right now from a mental health perspective, is it how to slow things down and just be in this one moment? Is it this exercise of things change, so you need to, if you can just stay with this for a little bit, it will be different in 20 minutes, tomorrow, whatever. What kind of tools and messages do we need to be sending to kids so that they can function this is intentionally vague, but function and contribute to life, Anyway, it's interesting to me. I have all this writing about raising my boys, and I've been trying to figure out what is it about, what's the common thread in all these stories that I tell. And a lot of it's about what was my goal for my kids, because it wasn't just for them to be happy. It was for them to have skills so that, they could feel alive and navigate and value being alive, whatever that looked like,
No, that's such an important shift we need to make, because I was never taught life, right? I wasn't taught how to cope when things were going to happen. When we're in school, there's a very good chance we're going to lose someone we love. We're going to have to grieve. That's a big part of life, whether it's grieving a death or it's grieving a loss of a relationship or a friendship. There's so a pet, a loved one, there's so
For a lot of children, it's their parents' marriage. Divorce is a huge source of grief.
Yeah, and we're not taught how to cope with that, yet that's prevalent among all of us. That's something we're all going to have to deal with in some capacity or another, whether it's ourselves or maybe our friends who are going through it. We're not taught how to prepare for the academic stress and pressures that we're going to go through. Because one day you're going to get to 9th grade and they're going to tell you your entire future is dependent on this test you're going to take your junior year. And you need to do well because every single thing counts now, and your whole worth is going to be tied to what college you get into. Okay, that's maybe a little excessive, but that's how I felt it was presented to me.
That is, and what's so fascinating to me is that's the message that we send to kids, but that's also, it's really hard, even as a knowledgeable parent and teacher, not to take on that perspective and that pressure. It's so prevalent. It's so it's permeable. It's like you become so permeable to this cultural expectation of yes, if you're in this math class in 9th grade, you may not be able to be a doctor to get into med school. You know what I mean? They do make these connections. And I remember so deliberately having to check in with myself and be what message, how do I need to be correcting this message for my kids, for my boys, who are very bright and can handle a lot. But I don't think I want high school to be 4 years of practicing how to make yourself crazy and overwhelmed and always working towards some distant outcome that you're not even sure you're invested in for good reason yet. You know what I mean? For me, I felt like, whether this is going to sound like a throw pillow. I've never said this before. But for me, I always lead with learning and I lead with love from a parent perspective. So if everything else fails, love them, if everything else fails, is there something to be learned? Because so high school for me was about, they need to understand their learning process. I want them to learn as much about their learning process as I want them to learn about the things they're supposed to be learning, content. And I want them to be able to enjoy the richness of information, So I wasn't like, let's take all AP classes or anything like that. I take one class that you think is going to really challenge you. And then the other classes will definitely challenge you because you're just going to be, it's high school. You're going to be working all the time to stay up on things. So for me, it was like, choose the one that you're going to be like, all right, there's going to be a little bit of a push and pull, tug, uphill, but don't make every class that way, because this is practice for real life. And I want you practicing your behaviors now while I'm here and I can be of support if you need me, that you'll be using when you go out in the world and I'm no longer there, So yes, there should be a challenge, something that's like, you have to maybe grind your teeth at night or whatever you're doing. And then there should be other things that you're learning and you're able to kind of flow with, and you're able to feel really successful at. Not everything has to be a hurdle to clear. So that's kind of how we did it. And it was not easy or neat. It was a big, messy clusterfuck. Even with that intention, and even being aligned with my kids on that intention, huge clusterfuck. I mean, because there's just curveballs everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's not even talking about like just the element of that they were that my kids are boys, cisgender boys, like who we're trying to figure out also, like, is masculinity supposed to be something they embody? And if so, what does that look like? And sexuality. And just like, oh my gosh. The way we used to say to kids, like, well, just wait till you get to the real world. I always thought that was so obnoxious. Like high school, like those things are so much the real world, Yeah. Like I get that you're not, I get where it came from, right? But that is just such an obnoxious thing to say to somebody who their brain isn't fully developed and they're learning all these things while they're, I just think about my son, Jake, who was really physical, and he was a skateboarder and he loved parkour, like there was this year where he grew, like, I don't even know how many inches. And all of a sudden, he couldn't do the flips that he used to be able to do. It wasn't even a year. It was like a summer, right? So his body changed so swiftly and dramatically that like his center of gravity was different. The physics of how he was going to move his body to be able to do the same thing that he did a month earlier was totally different. And as a metaphor for that whole time period when you're changing so much and you have to get on board and figure out how to do the same thing with a new perspective or a new body or new hormones, it's crazy. It's crazy. And again, fascinates me, but
it is. And it's so much happening at that time. Our bodies are changing, hormones are happening. There's so much academic pressure. There's the stress of a lot of times people are starting to explore their sexuality and figure out who they like, who they don't like, maybe fall in love, have their heart broken for the first time. Very, very big stuff. Finding their friends, finding out that their friends aren't their actual friends, figuring out crowds you're going to fall into. Am I going to be the popular one? Okay, if I'm popular, do I be mean or am I the nice one? Like what? All these different roles that you can fall into, figuring out who you are and who you want to be in the midst of that. And then they're telling you, figure out what career path you want, because the decision you make right now in 9th grade is going to impact you getting there. That's so much pressure. And then on top of that, they're like, wait till you get to the real world. Like, thank you. It's going to get worse than this. This is a lot right now. How is that helpful? But then also, like, this is the real world. This is just my world right now in 9th grade is all of this.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times when adults say that, they forget that that was their whole world at one time too, right? Because you're so far past it. I was saying this to one of my cousins the other day. I was like, it's not the end of the world. And I was like, okay, no, it's the end of the world to you, because that is your whole world. When your friend moves away and that's your best friend, that is your whole world. That feels like it's imploding. So how can I support you? But I did have to catch myself, because I was like it's going to be fine. And like, it is going to be okay. But how do we support them right now so they get to that place where it's okay and they're not falling apart for years afterwards, trying to figure it all out on their own? because 14, 15, 16, 17, I mean, I'm still learning how to figure it out. I'm almost 25. So it takes time, and it's okay if they don't know everything, but to sit there and add on the extra stress is a lot. I actually posted on my Instagram today how I remember being, I was like 15, 16 years old, and they wanted, our academic advisors wanted to list who we wanted to be, what our future career goal was, what college we wanted to go to, and like how it was all going to align. And I had to be 16 because 15-year-old me had just started my first podcast. So my brain was like, I'm going to be Oprah Winfrey. So that's what I said. And my advisor was so annoyed. She was like, I need like a college degree. What do you want? And I'm like, I want to be Oprah. So in my high school file, it says I want to be Oprah Winfrey. But like that was a very real thing that I felt. And everyone was like all this pressure of, you need to pick a major. 16 years old. I don't know. I just know I want to be someone who has impactful conversations that inspire people. Don't know in what capacity that's going to be yet. But it's like taking away some of the individuality from kids and telling them you need to fall into a category at 14, 15, 16, when you're still trying to figure out all these different categories of life and what they mean and who you are.
And I think, let's see if I can remember all the things that I want to say in response to that. I just listened to all these podcasts on being perimenopausal. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so validating. Like, it's my brain and my working memory is not the same. And I can't hold like, oh wait, these are 3 things I want to say, boom, 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 and still be listening to you at the same time. So now, of course, I've forgotten them all. But I think one thing I wanted to say is that like being okay and is iterative, like how would I explain that? Like saying it's okay is, okay, I'm trying to say 2 things at the same time. Number 1 is we should define what being okay means, right? Because it's so important to say you're going to be okay. But like we know some people aren't. Some people get in car accidents or some people die or whatever. We don't want to be lying to people. Awful stuff happens. But it's about knowing that in this moment we can breathe, we can create okayness, and that the next moment will be different. And that, what does it take to create okayness? And it can be elusive, but it always comes back around, So I don't know, there's something about, when we say it'll be okay, that needs to be more broadly defined or understood. And then the iterative piece I wanted to say is that figuring out who you want to be when you grow up, like that is, first of all, when are you grown up? Second of all, like, I mean, you're talking to somebody now, I'm about to be 49. I have been a craniosacral therapist. I've done like holistic therapy, and I've been a manager of massage services. I've been a parent in many capacities. I've been a teacher. I've been all different kinds of teachers. I've taught 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. I've taught literacy, right? I am now an author. I've written memoir. I've written children's books. I talk to groups of children. I tutor, like what am I when I grow up, when I've grown up, It's so iterative. It's ongoing. So, I think a lot of life is about finding the balance between choosing a goal or an outcome that you want to work toward, but also understanding it's ongoing, and sometimes it's gonna change, or you're gonna pass that. You're gonna learn something on the way that says, oh, that one didn't fit. My son right now is in Japan. He loves Japan, and he's going. He went to college for a year. He took a year off. He goes back in the fall, and he called from Japan last night, and he was like, I still don't know what my major should be, or what I want to do, or how to use my strengths to do something. And he's feeling all that pressure to figure it out. So he's not, 6. He's not in 15 being asked, by his guidance counselor, what do you want to go to college for? He's actually in college, and it's a relevant question to think about, like, what do you want to study? What will give you, what fits you and matches your desires and the impact you want to have on the world and your strengths. And he doesn't know, because that's a really big thing to know. And And it's more of a decision, right? I think if I go this route, I'll have these opportunities. If I go this route, I'll have those opportunities. So I don't even know how to guide him at the point in time where it is really relevant to kind of decide, right? Your second year in college, pick a major. Because it's iterative, it's ongoing. And the reality is that he could be 49 years old and have been many things and will be. And what he's doing to make a living or what he's doing to impact the world, what his occupation looks like, those aren't all necessarily the same thing. So I think there's a lot of oversimplifying going on. And this was going to say poor kid, but he's not a poor kid. He's great. He's got all these resources, but he feels like he's got to decide, and it's like, so even what's right? Is there even a right? Just pick something that is going to feel rich and enjoyable to you, and hope that leads to something that feels equally rich and enjoyable in the future. And he's like, but I have to save the world because we have a world that needs saving. So he feels that pressure. And it's like, okay, yes. And if you're going to be successful at doing something like that, it still needs to be coming from your heart, strength, love, and learning, and all those things. So you still have to align with that, the propulsion that's about love and learning, not the propulsion that's about saving the world.
It's very daunting, and that made me feel so validated because when I had to decide a major, I remember I chose management in my undergrad because I was like, okay, no matter what industry I go into, I can go into any industry in a business management type position. So that kind of became my original thought process. Then I was like, maybe I like coding. Everyone says technology is the future of everything. Why don't I go learn to code? Did my master's in information systems. As I cried during my final for Java, and then cried every time I do assignment in Python, realized I hate coding, but still finished the master's and spent way too much money to find out that's not what I wanted to do, but I felt obligated to finish. Then I switched paths and now I'm doing my master's in psych. And I'm like, maybe this is what I want to do. It's a lot of pressure to try to figure it out and figure out who you are in the midst of it. And it's okay that it changes. And I don't think people talk about that enough, that it's okay if the major you pick at 18, 19, 20 years old isn't what you end up doing when you're 24, 25. It can change within a few years, and that's okay. And getting a bachelor's in one thing doesn't limit every possibility, kind of like what we're taught. Doesn't mean you have to go into a specific industry, a specific job. There may be ways to work in different industries, different fields, get to try different things, be part of different organizations, go off on your own and do something that makes you feel good inside and makes you feel passionate. It's all gonna be okay, because I was such a valid point to define okay. But
it is.
It is.
This moment, we're still good. There's going to be so many moments where we go, okay, am I okay right now? Yes. Is it because I'm still figuring it out? Yes. Yeah. Life is just about an indefinite amount of figuring stuff out, problem solving,
And you don't have to have it all figured out today. And that's one thing that daunts me, really taunts me every day, is that fear or that feeling of I have to have it figured out. I have to have it figured out. But we're also learning and growing, and you don't have to have it figured out at a certain age. You don't turn 22, graduate college, and have it all figured out. You don't turn 30 and have it all figured out. You don't just wake up one day and have it all figured out. And you may think you have it figured out for now, and then things change in the future. Life changes, things happen. All of it is valid, and it's okay for figuring it out and trying and changing paths a million times, as long as you're staying true to who you are and who you want to be, and not feeling like you have to sacrifice yourself in the midst of it, because that's what so many people do. We sacrifice ourselves and what we want. We think that the decision we made at 18 on what major we chose is what we have to do for the rest of our lives.
I think there are pressures, there are things that push us to believe that, right? There's financial pressures. I can only do this once, so I better get it right. I can't afford to do this another time, or can't afford to study the wrong thing and then not be able to get a job when I get out of college. Or there are pressures in terms of cultural expectations. If you want to be considered a success, I need to have a certain job when I get out. I need to have a certain income. So we put these financial and cultural pressures on each other. And I think we do it sort of unconsciously sometimes. We don't even realize where we got the values that we're applying to people, and in a way that's not supportive. Like, I think it's one of the things that I have taught my boys, and this might partly be because I didn't raise them to be religious. We talked so much about values and what they value, so that when they're making decisions, or they're behaving in a certain way, they can figure out how to align it with what they value. And I didn't tell them what to value, but I encouraged certain values. And there's a hierarchy to what you value. So for me, like, relationship is number one. For some people, it's a moral or ethical value about the planet or the world or who knows what. And my boys have those values to figure out, number one, am I okay? Because, like, if they're aligned with a value, they're still okay, or if something has undermined that and they need to get back to aligning with a value, at least they know where they're going, where they want to get back to, right? Like, so I don't know. I think this idea about helping people cultivate values that are meaningful to them is important. And that will help with this indefinite ongoing process, which, by the way, you should have outcomes that you get excited about. There should be a sense of satisfaction when you achieve something, like that's all great, but it should also be embedded in the process, not just about the outcome. Like publishing a book, right? That's like a huge accomplishment. This should just be like celebrating, and, I should be feeling the satisfaction and the achievement of that. But the process to get the book out there is so convoluted and arduous, and sometimes unpredictable. And then even when it's out there, that's a whole process too. That's not just like one moment where you get to celebrate. Like, so my second children's book, Proud Mouse, comes out on September 12th, right? So September 12th, like, at what point in that day am I like, woohoo, because I'm going to be running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to promote it and talk about it. And there's a whole nother process that ensues when, one thing ends and the beginning happens. You celebrate, yay, I published the book, but then the next process ensues, and that's always going to be successful. Will anybody buy it? Will people love it as much as I do? I need to promote it. I need to be reading it. So the whole idea that, outcomes are important and we should celebrate them and take a moment to do that. But also, the truth is, it's a never-ending process. So if you don't have joy in that, and you can't find value or richness in that, then, that's where I think a lot of depression and stuff comes from. And the disillusionment of that, you never actually get somewhere without needing to be looking at where you're still going.
First of all, congratulations on your upcoming book. That is incredible. And I hope you make time to celebrate it, because it is so easy to get lost in all that's going on to make time to celebrate. But you deserve to celebrate every single piece of that, because it's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of heart. Figuring out the message you want to put out there and how you want to put out there. It's all so important, and I really hope you make the time to celebrate it. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking with me today. How can people connect with you, learn more about you, purchase your book?
Thank you for asking that. I have just CaraMentzel.com as my website. Of course, you'd have to know how to spell my name, and my Cara has a C, and Mentzel, unlike my sister's last name, has a T, so it's CARAMENTZEL. And so that could link you to any number of things. It'll link you to my memoir, to the 2 children's books. And my favorite thing I'm doing right now is I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have a blog that I really love that's called The Empty Next. And so a lot of my stories that are not sister related, that are just, well, some of them are, but that are about this time in life where I am now parenting adults or semi-adults from a distance. And I'm looking at, what am I going to be next? Am I going to be a writer? What does that life look like? Am I going to go back to teaching? In what capacity? What would that look like? Am I going to be a barista, which would be awesome, and just be talking to people all the time? And like, really, there's so much I'm on the cusp of. I'm learning the ukulele.
Fun.
And I might be moving for the next decade of my life. Who knows? Because it feels like this is going on forever. So anyway, Empty Next is a lot of writing about, it always goes back to a value that's important to me. And it's always about these moments where we get to appreciate simply being alive, because that is what I ultimately taught my children. It's not about happiness. It's about how much we value being alive, whatever that looks like or feels like, that we're like on board for it, and that we're not alone in it.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.